The Sports Town Podcast.
Alrighty, I am pleased to be joined by Jesus Acevedor. Oh, shoot, I messed that name up. And then Alex Agarella of the Basketball is Friend podcast. How's it going, guys? And sorry for butchering your names. That's my bad.
No problem. And you want to butcher our podcast name. It's the Basketball Fiends. Fiends, like junkies.
Okay, that's my bad. Again, that's all me, unfortunately. So yeah, go check your guys' podcast, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. How's it going, guys?
It's going good. You know, can't complain. Just can't complain. Let's just say that.
Yeah, just chilling.
Yeah, now the NBA season is over, but we had a great finals between the Bucks and Suns. But before we start that, if you want to tell more about your podcast, how you do it, I was listening to it a little last night. But if you want to tell us more about your podcast, where we can get it, all that good stuff.
Yeah, the Basketball Fiends is a weekly half-hour podcast. We try to do about 4 topics in half an hour. We're a member of the R. Esquina Podcast Network, and R. Esquina is a website dedicated. It's we call it the corner of the sports and culture world that amplifies Latino, Latina, Latinx, whatever word you want to use, their voices and their stories. And Alex and I have been doing this podcast since mid-January, I think, Alex, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I want to say around mid-January we started.
And the funny part is, Alex and I didn't know each other. We weren't aware of each other. We just hooked up through our Esquina, and they were like, Alex was putting a basketball podcast together through our Esquina, and at that time, I was actually going to do a soccer podcast because that's like my second love is soccer. And I was like, well, man, if you want to co-host, let me jump on. And from there, we've just been doing it every week, 30 minutes.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've checked out a lot of podcasts, and I saw you guys out on Instagram, and I was very interested, and it looked pretty looked like a great podcast. But before we start talking about the NBA Finals, you mentioned you're a Houston Rockets fan, Jesus, and of course they have the number 2 pick in the draft. And according to Shams Charania, which I didn't know this before we started recording, but the Rockets are trying to move up because they really want Cade Cunningham. What do you guys think of that? And another question is, John Wall, is he a part of the Rockets' future?
I saw that tweet by Shams, and those have been the rumblings for the past couple of weeks that the Houston Rockets want to jump up to the number 1 spot. They do have a lot of picks. They have the second pick. They have the 23rd pick, the 24th pick. So, and of course they have future picks from the James Harden trade. So they definitely want to go there because I think Cade Cunningham is the consensus number 1. I don't think there'll be no surprise there. I think both of you guys will agree with me. If they can get it, I think that quickly raises the Houston Rockets from a non-playoff team to maybe a contender to be in the play next year. But it definitely sets them up for a good future. As far as John Wall, my prediction is I don't think he'll be with the Houston Rockets starting the season. I think there's a lot of teams that could use a veteran point guard of his caliber. Now, it could maybe wait till end the season where they trade him, but I believe that the Houston Rockets are trying to move John Wall. But right now, that's not their focus right now.
What about you, Alex? What do you think?
I'm kind of on the same boat with Jesus there. I will say probably like Houston's going to settle with Jalen Green out of the G League. I think he's probably going to be the number 2 guy out of that draft. And, look, if they're going to move on from John Wall, Jalen Green is a bright young man coming into the league. He dropped like 18 points per game in the G League. And he's got a ton of athleticism. I don't know if you guys have seen this dude, but man, this guy's got bunnies. And so, either way, when you go with Jalen Green, there's nothing wrong with that. And like Jesus said, I think Houston kind of knows already what they're going to go for. As much as they're going to try to gun for that number 1 pick, I just don't think Detroit's going to let that go. It'd be kind of dumb. I think Cade Cunningham is the clear number 1 choice. So, if they do that's bold.
And I think also, going back to the John Wall point, the Houston Rockets have made Kevin Porter Jr. a point guard. This is a guy that was pretty much traded for like a bag of popcorn by the Cleveland Cavaliers. So, he's the only player. He dropped 50 points against the NBA champs Milwaukee Bucks. So, there's definitely a bright future there. So, imagine Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green in the backcourt. That's a scary backcourt.
Yeah, and I feel like the Houston Rock. I mean, first of all, we'll start with the Detroit Pistons. They, of course, have the number one pick, and I'm really surprised still that they got the number one pick because the Pistons are never lucky. And I think the Pistons will take Cade Cunningham, but the Rockets are an interesting team as well because, again, they have John Wall. I'm with you too, Jesus. I don't think he's going to be with the Rockets when the season begins, or I think he's going to get traded maybe in the deadline if he's still with them when the season begins. I could see maybe him going to the Lakers or something if they can't get Chris Paul or Russell Westbrook. But it's going to be interesting. I think I was hearing today on the radio that I think Bobby Marks from ESPN mentioned that it's kind of a top-heavy draft where there's the four best players and Cade Cunningham, Jalen Suggs, Evan Mobley, and then you got Jalen Green, as Alex mentioned. But it's going to be interesting after that. And, of course, I'm just intrigued to see what the Rockets do with that number 2 pick. And it would be very interesting to see what they do with that number 1 pick. But before we talk about the NBA Finals, do you think the Rockets will be able to make a move from number 2 to number 1? And if they do, what would they trade exactly?
It's interesting. For sure, they will have to give up the number 2 pick. I wouldn't be surprised if they also give up either the 23rd and 24th pick, one of those picks, and then probably add a player. I know Eric Gordon is still out there, that another player that the Rockets are trying to move. And look, Eric Gordon, once healthy, he's a solid NBA player. He can get you buckets. He's a solid defender, not great, but solid defender. So I don't think they'll move up. That's my prediction. I think the Pistons will probably want a big, large haul for the number 1 pick, and I don't think the Rockets were willing to give up that much. And one last point on John Wall. It's interesting you said that John Wall to the LA Lakers. I actually think he may go to the LA Clippers. I think John Wall with the Clippers will make good sense.
Yeah, as you mentioned, just the Clippers. I'm a huge Kawhi Leonard fan, so I would love to see them get a top point guard. I don't know. I got a feeling that, Reggie Jackson had a great year, and I think he's a free agent. I doubt the Clippers will bring him back. If they do, that wouldn't be a terrible option, but I would love for them to sign John Wall or even go for a Kyle Lowry maybe, because, of course, they already have Kawhi. They have Serge Ibaka. What do you think about that, Alex?
Yeah. I think the John Wall move to the Clippers would make a bit more sense because I know Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan are, of course, we all know they're buzz, and I think they're trying to go to the Lakers. So, we'll see how that goes. I don't know how that's going to go down. But I think a John Wall move to the Clippers makes a ton of sense if they're going to lose out on Reggie Jackson. Like you said, I don't think he comes back. So, picking up John Wall would be fantastic.
Yeah, regardless, I think it's going to be a fun draft and a fun offseason, and definitely a lot of trades since there's not a lot of good free agents outside of Kawhi Leonard. And, there's a few others that I can't think of right now, but I just know there's going to be a lot of trades. Now that the NBA season is over, of course, the Bucks take down the Suns in 6 games. What did you guys think of the NBA Finals this year?
What did you think, Jesus? Because I know you got stuff to say.
I was trying to let you speak first, since I feel like I'm just jumping.
All right, fine.
Podcast.
I'll go for it. I love this year's finals. I thought it was lit. It was fantastic. Like, everything about it was just enjoyable. All the storylines involved around it. Obviously, Giannis and his story. You got Chris Middleton, a G League guy who becomes a NBA champion. Drew Holiday, a gritty player, kind of bouncing around from teams, and finally ends up with the Bucks, and it's sort of like that last piece they needed to get over the hump. And of course, you got the young Phoenix Suns with Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, Mikal Bridges stepped up, Cameron Payne basically revived his whole career with Phoenix, and I would know that because when he was with the Bulls, that definitely wasn't the case. But overall, it was definitely a very refreshing NBA Finals. It was a nice breath of fresh air to just see different teams instead of the usual Golden State Cleveland matchups that we always had. And I remember the Heat and the Spurs when they had their big three. So yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, that's something that we kept saying throughout the playoffs is how refreshing it was to see new blood, new players, which was the next wave that's going to carry this NBA, on into the next, 10, 15 years. So it definitely was good to see them. We saw Devin Booker had his come out party in these playoffs, his first playoffs appearance. Chris Paul making it to the NBA Finals. It has to be said. I wonder how Chris Paul plays if he never catches COVID. Because I know that there's been some you know studies that for some people COVID has a long term effect. So I wonder if Chris Paul never gets COVID, how does that affect? Maybe we're talking about a different NBA champion. But no, these NBA finals were so great, so fun. I I I meant to look at the NBA ratings to compare it to past years, but I definitely know that many people watched because it was new teams, and great storylines. And I mean, come on, Giannis, how can you not love his story? He was selling shoes, selling trinkets on the when he was a young kid, and now he's here and an NBA champion. And I'm sure all of us saw that one video where Giannis, he's looking up at the rafters and he's telling his dad and mom, I want a rafter up there, I want my name up there, and I want to have a championship banner. And then he did it. And it's just such a great story. Like, I'm just waiting for Disney to make a movie about him now.
Yeah, it's definitely a great story, and especially what he came with. And I think there's a story that they tell a lot, but it's still, I think it's a great story. It's when after he was drafted by the Bucks, I think he all of his money at the time was going to his family over in Greece, and one time his whole paycheck went to his family over in Greece. Had no money enough for a cab, started to walk or was running or something, didn't have a car, so basically walked to the stadium. Someone says, hey, you're Giannis or whatever, and picks him up. I just think that, and it goes to the statement, I think that's a great story. And of course, the Bucks, when they originally drafted Giannis, they were just a mediocre team, maybe even below mediocre. They were just not good. They had a hard time.
Awful.
They were awful.
But I mean, not just them. I mean, the whole Bucks organization, going down to their arena, I believe it was called Bradley Center. It was in shambles, really, and it was just that whole Milwaukee Bucks organization needed a whole change from top to bottom. And Giannis was that first piece, and now I'm not sure if I remember, but did they trade Brandon Jennings before or after Giannis?
Brandon Jennings,
to be honest,
he was, sorry, he cut you off. He was drafted, I believe, before Giannis got drafted. I think it was in 2013 or something like that, and Chris Middleton was a part of that deal.
Yeah, so up to that point, Brandon Jennings was the most recognizable Buck, and they traded him for Chris Middleton. Well, I mean, not just Chris.
I mean, there was a package, but
it was a package. But now we know that Chris Middleton was the main piece that came back. But at that time, nobody knew. Chris Middleton was a 39-pick second rounder. I think he barely got playing time with the Pistons. Once again, the Pistons. So it's an organization that they've rebuilt themselves the right way. And this is something that I mentioned on our podcast, the Basketball Fiends, that they did it the right way. They trusted their scouting department. They trusted their coaches. Now, speaking about the coach, I know earlier this season, one of our topics is Coach Bud on the hot seat, because there were all these rumors circulating that if the Bucks don't make a deep playoff run, Coach Bud was going to get fired. Clearly, now he said, right?
That man was out the door and he just slammed it shut. He's like, nope, I'm staying.
Yeah, and like you said, Mike Budenholzer was definitely on the hot seat before the season. I feel like if he would have lost the conference finals, he might have been out the door. But because there were so many years where there was 2 straight years where they were the top seed, lost to the Raptors, then lost to the Heat. And then, of course, as we all know, that before when the Bucks drafted Giannis, I think they had hard times selling out the seats. I don't think there was not many people watching the Bucks, and now it's like 60,000 people were in the Deer District, which is crazy. As we go to the Suns side now, it looks like Chris Paul, he could be a free agent this year if he opts out, which is most likely going to happen. But do you think he'll return to the Suns? And if he does return to the Suns, where do you think he'll be next season?
I'll let Alex answer this first, because from the very beginning on our third episode, I think, or second episode, we had a hot take for the season. And my hot take was that the Brooklyn Nets will not make the NBA Finals. And I actually made that as a joke because I thought that they would make the finals, but I just wanted to pick something, something. Oh wow, it's a hot take. But Alex's hot take, he said the Phoenix Suns will make a run to the Western Conference Finals. So he had been on this Phoenix Suns train from the very beginning. So Alex, what do you think?
Oh hell yeah! I hopped on the train right after that bubble run. I was like, this team, all they need is one guy, one vet, and once they got Chris Paul, I was like, man, that's exactly who they need. And you even look at what CP3 did with OKC. I think they were like a 5th seed in the bubble. And I think they went to 7 games. So I mean,
with the Houston Rockets, I remember clearly because
I remember.
Blocked Lou Dort.
That's true, right? When he was with Houston as well. So I mean, the Chris Paul effect is real. So in regards to like if he comes back or not, I would say if he goes, it would make more sense for him to go to the Lakers just because I think he has that I need to win a title right now. I mean, he's 36, which isn't old, but in basketball standards, I mean, he's getting to that point.
In basketball terms, that is pretty old, Alex. And I think that was the first immediate thought I had. As soon as the game was over, I said, Chris Paul's going to go to the LA Lakers. I mean, him and LeBron James are too friendly. We all remember them with the banana boat with D-Wade. So, I mean, they're, really close friends. His family lives in LA. That was one of the reasons why he signed with the Phoenix Suns, to be close to his family. So my immediate thought as soon as the game was over was like, well, Chris Paul is going to the LA Lakers and the Lakers will be the favorites to win the title. If I'm not mistaken, they are currently the favorites to win the title next season.
Any team with LeBron is always a favorite.
True that.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the banana boat and LeBron and Chris Paul are friends. It also made it pretty obvious when LeBron went to the Suns and Bucks game in Game 5, which was very interesting because you normally don't see LeBron as a fan when he's not in the finals. So I just thought that was kind of weird, and that just seemed like, it's most likely LeBron's trying to convince him to sign. Do you think like a guy like Melo then? I don't know if he's a free agent this year, but I know he's currently in Portland. But do you think if he's available, do you think the Lakers would try to pick him up too, even though he's getting older?
Ooh,
I actually hadn't thought about that.
That is interesting. I think he would definitely be like coming off the bench because I mean probably like Kuzma would be gone at that point or something like that. I mean, especially with all the talk that's been going on with him, and I think too like the Lakers need help on the bench. They don't have as much depth as we thought. We all thought Dennis Schroeder was definitely going to be that guy to kind of pick up the slack with the Lakers, and that didn't happen. Montrezl Harrell underperformed. Marc Gasol, Andre Drummond, when he came in, obviously it was kind of late, but still, like a lot of those guys underperformed. So yeah, when you mentioned that, that's actually kind of an intriguing idea for sure.
No, but here's what I say is, if Carmelo would have, if he really wanted to play with LeBron and LeBron really wanted to play with them, they would have made it happen last season. Because I mean, I think he would have maybe, I guess taking a pay cut to go play with LeBron. I'm not sure how much he's getting paid with Portland. But I actually wouldn't be surprised. Maybe that might be my hot take for during the offseason.
Just steal JJ's idea.
Yeah, steal JJ's idea.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what Portland does too. And speaking of Portland, it really looks like Dame Lillard is out the door. And of course, I know the Warriors are going to try to trade for him. I don't see how that's going to work with Steph Curry and stuff like that. But who do you guys think would be the best fit for Dame Lillard?
I threw this out on the podcast, and Alex shut it down so quick. I said, "What if Dame Lillard went to the Phoenix Suns?"
Oh yeah, I don't know.
Alex was not having
it. You'd be surprised of what team I picked would be actually a good fit for him.
What'd you pick?
Oh man, I switched up. Well, not that I switched up. Actually, I think the Knicks wouldn't be bad.
Ooh, I can see. Yeah,
there is a big. Yeah, it's New York's a big market, but I mean the Knicks do have money. I'm just not sure what would the Knicks give up. What like
that's true. Yeah, it would be.
I mean, you could.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. My bad. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. I mean, they could maybe Mitchell Robertson, Kevin Knox. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of all their roster outside of Derrick Rose and Julius Randle.
Probably RJ Barrett, you would have to revolve a deal around him.
I forgot about him. Yeah,
but even then, it's like, does that make Portland better? Because I think Portland will at least want to stay somewhat competitive. And now here's what I'll do. I'll flip it. Do you think Dame Lillard saw these finals and said, "Wow, a mid-market team won the NBA championship"? You know, does that now change the mindset of Dame Lillard? And now he's like, "Look, we just need to retool our roster. You know, maybe instead of trading Dame Lillard, they trade CJ McCollum, which I know he didn't have the greatest playoffs, but we know the type of player that CJ McCollum is. So I I'm not quite sure. I actually don't think Dame Lillard gets traded. And if he does, maybe it'll be midseason, but I don't think it'll happen in the off season.
Yeah, I mean, before this season started, I thought Dame Lillard to Milwaukee made a lot of sense, but that was before the Drew Holiday trade. And even after the Drew Holiday trade, I'm like, that doesn't make much sense. But obviously now it's perfect because the Bucks won a championship. But I just thought Dame Lillard originally to Milwaukee made a lot of sense. But I mean, I just can't think of a team right now. I don't think the Warriors, the Lakers. I can't see the Blazers trying to trade Dame Lillard to the Lakers.
Because it definitely has to be a large haul. Because I think there's 4 years remaining on Dame Lillard's contract, and I think it was Brian Windhurst. He said if Dame Lillard gets traded, he anticipates it'll be a larger haul than James Harden. For the simple fact, not that he's saying that Dame Lillard is better, but he's saying for the simple fact that James Harden only had 2 years left on the contract. Dame Lillard has 4, so you're guaranteed to have at least Dame Lillard for 4 years. So that would get you a larger haul than what the Rockets got for James Harden.
Do you have anything? About maybe Dame Lillard possibly going to just? What do you think, Alex?
I mean, I could maybe see Philly as, I guess, a team that might have enough for a haul in regards to Dame Lillard. Like obviously, like Ben Simmons is out the door, so it would probably be him and maybe, I don't know, Seth Curry,
maybe
something like that.
Maxey too, the young guard as well.
Thibault, I think is his name. Hopefully I said it right. So I can see Philly in that case as like a team that has enough for a Damian Lillard trade. But I would say I would agree with Jesus where I think Damian Lillard sticks around to try and see, hey, like we can retool, we can build up a squad that can compete for a championship. He's gonna see it through, but if it gets to the point where like Portland really isn't going to go anywhere and isn't going to win a championship, I think he's out.
I think Philly, sorry JJ, but I think Philly makes so perfect sense. You know, Dame Lillard with Joe Embiid, I think that just makes so much sense because if the Portland Trailblazers, of course, they'll have to get Ben Simmons back, that still keeps them competitive in the West. Not championship potential, but look, we've seen in these playoffs anything can happen. You know, one injury to one or the other team, and who knows, right? But I think Philly just makes too much sense for it to not happen. So I'll say now, I'm gonna jump on with Alex and say Dame Lillard's gonna be a 76er.
I forgot about the Sixers, to be honest with you. I mean, that was kind of the trade. I think after Philly lost to Atlanta, right?
Atlanta.
Yep.
After they lost, I think we kind of heard Dame Lillard to the Sixers and stuff like that. But I don't really know, to be honest with you. I can't really see. I mean, are the Blazers really that great if they trade Dame Lillard for Ben Simmons and probably a few other players? I just can't see it. And to be honest with you, I don't think Ben Simmons is a point guard. I think he should go to the 3 or 4. Or maybe be like more of a point forward, kind of like what LeBron is. But the way he just can't shoot, so I don't really consider him a point guard. But at the end of the day, I mean, we'll see what happens with the Sixers. I mean, they're still a really good team with Joel Embiid. But I mean, it's gonna be wild to see what they do in the offseason. And again, thanks for coming on, guys. But did you think, or is there another player is there another free agent that I'm forgetting that you could see jumping to another team and kind of shocking all of us?
John Collins.
Ooh, John Collins, you're right. He is
Collins.
Is he a free agent or is he a?
I think he's restricted.
Okay.
I think he's a restricted free agent, but that would sort of be like a little bold prediction I have for the offseason would be like John Collins ended up somewhere.
I think I know you said that you're a big Kawhi fan, JJ. And look, you know, there's been rumors floating around that perhaps Kawhi isn't as safe to return to the Clippers, which to me, I think that's just a lot of buzz. Because look, we all heard that he bought a super expensive house in LA. Granted, he could just sell it, right? But I don't see what team he will go to that gives him a better chance than the LA Clippers, especially how well they played after he left. I think Kawhi will stay with LA, but I think you hit it on the head, JJ. There's not many marquee players in this free agency, but there's a lot of mid-tier players that can make a difference. Bobby Portis, he's a free agent this season, and I know some teams are going to look at him and be like, I could use a player like Bobby Portis. I could use a dog on my team. Reggie Jackson from the LA Clippers. As much as Reggie Jackson would like to go back, I think some team is just going to throw crazy money at Reggie Jackson. I mean, money talks, right? We all know that money talks. So it's. I don't think there's many marquee free agents, but there's a lot of good mid-tier free agents that can definitely help a team out.
Yeah, and I think, Alex, you first mentioned John Collins, and I kind of heard a lot of sources, John Collins to the Spurs. That would help San Antonio a lot, I think, if they could sign Collins. And then, of course, as you mentioned, Jesus, Kawhi Leonard, of course, he's a free agent this year. If he opts out, which he probably is going to, because he can make the supermax of the Clippers, which I think makes the most sense. But the Heat and Mavericks, I know, have been rumored are going to try to make a hard push at Kawhi. And Miami kind of makes sense because, you have Jimmy Butler and Kawhi. They're great friends. And before Kawhi went to the Clippers, he wanted Jimmy Butler, and of course Butler signed with Miami, but the only concern about that is Kawhi is far from home, and he wants to be in LA. And if he's not going to go to the Warriors, I don't think, because it's not his team, and that's one of the reasons why he didn't go to the Lakers, because it wasn't his team, it was LeBron's team. So I think he's safe with the Clippers. Reggie Jackson, I could see him getting a massive payday, the way he played this postseason. And of course, back to Kawhi, I think he's going to retain with the Clippers, because if Kawhi doesn't get hurt, I think the Clippers probably make the finals, because they took the Suns to 6 game with just Paul George. And I really think if Kawhi returns to the Clippers and he's healthy, the Clippers are, outside the Lakers, probably the second most team to win the finals. And of course, the Clippers with Kawhi are 4-1 or 4-2 versus the Lakers. So I could see them. And of course, I would love to see a conference final between the Lakers and Clippers. We still haven't got it yet, but it would be fun to watch. But as we end the interview, and again, thanks for coming on. Can you tell us more about your I know you mentioned your podcast a little bit, but can you tell us what you have in store for the future for the Basketball Fiends podcast?
Thank you for the Basketball Fiends. We're just next week we'll kind of wrap up our first season as hosting the Basketball Fiends podcast. And this first season was strictly audio. I think we made that conscious decision because, like I mentioned earlier, me and Alex, we had never really talked. We didn't know each other. So
we didn't know we existed.
Yeah, I was like, if someone would tell me, hey, do you know Alex Aguilera? I'd be like, I have no idea who you're talking about. But so we used this kind of first season for us to kind of get used to talking to each other, get to know each other, what our tendencies are. So for the second season of the Basketball Fiends, we're going to finally do video as well, which should be pretty interesting how that works, because I kind of like where it's just audio, because you can do little edits here and there, some of these silences. So it's gonna be interesting. I know, JJ, you do video, so hopefully you can give us some tips as to how we can do good video podcasts. But Alex, what can you say about the Basketball thing?
Yeah, man. I mean, it's. I'm so glad Jesus hopped on, because I had nobody to co-host the podcast with. It was just like I was talking with the editor, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to do a basketball podcast?" I was like, "Yeah, I'd be down." He's like, "Okay, find someone." And I was like, "Okay, I mean, we'll see." And Jesus hopped on, and he's been a great co-host. So, I mean, definitely, I think in the offseason, we'll definitely be talking about, obviously, rumors, NBA coaching changes, obviously the draft, where we might get into a little bit. I know we got some stuff going on in our personal lives, just moving around. So, but yeah, it should be fun. Definitely going to be expanding a lot more come next season.
And we definitely want to have more hosts during this offseason. JJ would love to have you on to our podcast. We need guests. But this first season, we really took it, like I said, just more us to kind of get used to, because this is the first podcast either one of us has done, really. I know, both of us had been, guests, similar to how we're guests here now. But this is our actual first podcast. We're producing it, we're doing all the legwork, all the research and everything. So it's definitely been fun. But for the future, that's I guess the best thing is we're jumping on to video now.
All right, that is great. Again, go check out the Basketball Fiends podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You guys are also on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or what are you guys all on for your social media?
You can find us on bballfiends_pod. for Instagram, Twitter, and I believe those are the 2 social medias we have, and that's it. And also follow our Esquina. They're our podcast. We're part of their podcast
Network.
So it's rsquina.com. You can also check out some great stories on there. I know we had a great story from our CEO with Danny Rojas, the Ted Lasso favorite. So yeah, there's some good stories on there. So check us out, the Basketball Fiends podcast and rsquina.com.
All right. Thanks for coming on. Don't forget to check out the Basketball Fiends podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Also check them out on Instagram and Twitter. Again, thanks for coming on, Jesus and Alex. It's been great. I enjoy talking about the NBA. And again, thanks for coming on and have a wonderful night.
Thank you for even having us on. So thank you, JJ.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to the Sports Town podcast, or the STP pod for short. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and much more. Also, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Sports Town Podcast. If you want to check out more videos of the Sports Town Podcast, click on the right.